Funny how the person everyone suspects first is sometimes the one who already knows the truth. The late afternoon sun hung low over Highway 27, casting a dull orange glow across a quiet gas station just outside the small town of Ridge County, the kind of place where pickup trucks outnumbered sedans, and everyone seemed to recognize the sheriff's cruiser the moment it rolled into the lot. The neon open sign flickered softly above the convenience store door while a dusty American flag moved lazily in the warm breeze. It should have been an ordinary stop for gas, nothing more than a routine moment in a routine town, but the stillness in the air suggested something different was about to unfold. Parked beside pump number 4 sat a dark gray SUV, clean, polished, and noticeably newer than most vehicles that passed through this part of the county. Standing beside it was a woman in her early 30s, Naomi Brooks, dressed simply in dark jeans and a light jacket, one hand resting calmly against the door while the other held a set of keys. She looked composed, almost thoughtful, her eyes scanning the quiet lot as if she were taking in every small detail. The security camera above the canopy, the reflection in the store window, the slow movement of cars passing along the highway just beyond the pumps. Nothing about her posture suggested urgency or guilt, but the sharp crunch of gravel under tires suddenly cut through the calm as a county patrol SUV rolled into the station and stopped with deliberate authority a few feet away. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Sheriff Cole Mercer, a tall man in his late 40s whose badge had made him a familiar presence across Ridge County for nearly 2 decades. His hat sat low over his brow as his eyes locked immediately onto Naomi, and then onto the SUV beside her. For a moment the entire station seemed to pause. A man fueling his truck slowed his movement. A teenager near the soda cooler pressed closer to the store window. Even the wind seemed quieter as Mercer approached, boots heavy against the concrete. He stopped a few feet from Naomi and glanced at the vehicle again before speaking in a voice loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "That your SUV?" he asked. Naomi turned toward him slowly, her expression calm and steady. "Yes," she replied. Mercer studied her for a long second, his gaze moving from her face to the vehicle and back again. "We've had a report of a stolen SUV matching that description," he said. "Mind explaining how you came into possession of it?" A faint ripple of curiosity spread through the small audience forming around the pumps. Naomi did not raise her voice, did not protest, did not show the slightest sign of irritation. Instead, she simply held the sheriff's gaze with a quiet composure that felt almost out of place in the tension building around them. "Officer," she said evenly, "I assure you there's been some misunderstanding." Mercer let out a short breath, the kind that carried more assumption than patience. "We'll figure that out," he replied, stepping closer to inspect the vehicle's license plate. The flashing reflection of his patrol lights danced across the polished SUV surface, turning the entire scene into something that felt less like a simple stop and more like a public spectacle. Inside the store, someone lifted a phone to record. Naomi noticed it, but said nothing. Her eyes briefly drifted upward toward the security camera mounted beneath the canopy before returning to the sheriff. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the stillness in her posture suggested something else entirely. Something measured. Something patient. And as Sheriff Mercer continued circling the SUV with growing certainty in his voice, the quiet gas station on Highway 27 slowly transformed into the stage for a moment that would soon make one thing very clear. The sheriff believed he had just stopped a thief. What he didn't realize yet was that the woman standing calmly beside that SUV had been watching him long before he ever stepped out of his cruiser. The warm air carried the faint smell of gasoline and asphalt as Sheriff Cole Mercer finished his slow circle around the SUV, his boots scraping lightly against the concrete near pump number 4. The flashing red and blue lights from his patrol vehicle reflected across the polished paint like restless shadows, catching the attention of every person still lingering in the small gas station lot. A pickup truck driver leaned against his door pretending to check his phone, though his eyes kept drifting back toward the scene. Inside the convenience store, the cashier stood frozen behind the counter, watching through the glass as if the moment unfolding outside were more interesting than anything that had happened all day. Mercer stopped beside the rear bumper and crouched slightly to read the license plate again before standing upright with a small nod. as though the numbers had confirmed something he already believed. He turned toward Naomi Brooks with the slow confidence of a man who had spent years being the final authority in a quiet county where few people ever questioned his judgment. Naomi remained beside the driver door, her posture relaxed, her hands visible, her expression steady. The keys in her hand caught a beam of sunlight and glinted briefly before she slipped them into the pocket of her jacket. She watched the sheriff without urgency, almost as if she had expected this exact moment long before his cruiser ever rolled into the station. Mercer rested one hand lightly on his duty belt and spoke again, his voice firm enough for the small audience around them to hear clearly. He explained that earlier that afternoon a neighboring county had reported a vehicle theft involving a dark SUV matching the description of the one parked beside her. According to the information he had received, the vehicle had been seen traveling along Highway 27 less than 20 minutes earlier. In a town like Ridge County, 20 minutes might as well have been yesterday, but the statement carried enough weight to make several onlookers exchange curious glances. Naomi listened carefully, nodding once as he spoke, but she did not interrupt. The sheriff interpreted her silence as confirmation that he was in control of the conversation. He stepped closer to the vehicle again and glanced through the tinted window, scanning the interior as if expecting to find some obvious proof that would settle the matter. The station canopy lights flickered softly above them while a distant 18-wheeler rumbled past on the highway, its long shadow sliding across the pavement before disappearing down the road. Naomi noticed everything. The camera above the fuel pumps slowly rotating. The angle of the patrol cruiser parked behind the SUV. The two bystanders now standing just close enough to hear every word. None of it seemed to surprise her. When Mercer turned back toward her, he folded his arms with a look of measured authority. He asked where she had come from, where she was headed, and how long she had been driving the vehicle. Naomi answered each question in a calm and even tone, explaining that she had arrived only a few minutes earlier and had stopped simply to refuel before continuing down the highway. Her voice carried no tension, no defensiveness, only quiet certainty. That composure seemed to irritate the sheriff more than any protest might have. He shifted his weight and glanced once more at the SUV before speaking again, this time slower, as if testing whether her calm would finally break. The gathering crowd sensed the tension growing. A woman near the ice machine whispered something to the man beside her. The teenager near the store window lifted his phone slightly higher to capture a better angle. Mercer took a step closer to Naomi and gestured toward the SUV with an open palm. He explained that until the situation was clarified, he would need to verify ownership of the vehicle and confirm her identification. To him, it was routine procedure. To the people watching, it looked like the beginning of something far more serious. Naomi reached slowly into her jacket pocket, not with hesitation but with deliberate calm, and paused for the briefest moment before speaking again. Her voice remained steady, almost thoughtful, as she looked directly at the sheriff and said that before he continued, there was something he might want to consider about the situation unfolding in front of him. The wind shifted slightly across the station canopy, carrying the distant sound of traffic from the highway. And in that quiet pause, the sheriff did not yet realize that the conversation he believed he was controlling had already begun to move in a direction he did not expect. The quiet pause between Naomi Brooks and Sheriff Cole Mercer seemed to stretch across the entire gas station, like the calm before a storm that no one could yet see forming. The breeze moved gently beneath the canopy lights while the distant highway hummed with steady traffic, but inside the small circle forming around pump number 4 the air felt noticeably heavier. Mercer studied Naomi carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to decide whether her calm tone was confidence or simply stubbornness. In his experience, most people became nervous the moment a sheriff questioned them beside flashing patrol lights. Voices rose. Explanations tumbled out. Too quickly. But Naomi did none of those things. Instead, she stood there with a quiet composure that made the moment feel strangely controlled, even though the sheriff believed he was the one directing it. Mercer shifted his stance and glanced once more at the SUV, then back at Naomi. He asked again where she had come from before stopping at the station. Naomi answered in the same measured tone, explaining that she had been driving south along Highway 27 for the past hour and had simply pulled off to refuel. She spoke clearly, every word steady, every detail simple and direct. The sheriff listened, though the look on his face suggested he had already formed his own conclusion long before hearing her explanation. The bystanders noticed it too. The pickup truck driver now leaned against the bed of his vehicle, arms folded, watching the exchange with open curiosity. The teenager by the window had stepped outside entirely, holding his phone at chest level as he quietly recorded. Even the cashier inside the store had moved closer to the glass door, her reflection faint in the sunlight as she tried to follow the conversation unfolding outside. Mercer nodded slowly, but did not step back. Instead, he walked to the front of the SUV and ran his fingers lightly across the hood, as if inspecting it for some invisible clue. The vehicle gleamed beneath the late afternoon sun, its paint reflecting the red and blue patrol lights in soft flashes that made the entire scene look like something from a small-town drama unfolding in real time. Mercer turned again and spoke with the calm certainty of a man who had spent years believing his instincts were rarely wrong. He explained that stolen vehicles sometimes appeared exactly like this one, parked quietly in places where no one expected trouble. He said that people who took them often tried to look calm. Naomi listened without interruption. When he finished, she gave a small, thoughtful nod, almost as if she appreciated the explanation rather than felt accused by it. That reaction seemed to confuse the sheriff more than anger would have. He took another step closer and asked to see identification that confirmed the vehicle belonged to her. Naomi slipped her hand slowly into the pocket of her jacket, not with the nervous motion of someone under pressure, but with the deliberate calm of someone who understood the importance of every movement. The bystanders leaned forward slightly. Even the wind seemed to quiet again beneath the canopy. But Naomi did not remove anything yet. Instead, she paused and looked briefly past the sheriff toward the highway entrance to the gas station. For just a moment, her attention drifted beyond the pumps as though she were listening for something no one else could hear. Then she returned her gaze to Mercer and spoke quietly. She said that before he continued the inspection, he might want to think carefully about what he was assuming. Mercer frowned slightly, clearly not used to being advised by someone he had just accused of driving a stolen vehicle. He asked what exactly she meant by that. Naomi did not raise her voice. She simply gestured once toward the SUV and then toward the small security camera above the pumps before speaking again with the same calm certainty that had defined every word she had said since the cruiser arrived. She explained that sometimes the story people believe they were uncovering was only the surface of something much larger. The sheriff followed her gesture toward the camera, then back toward the vehicle, but he still did not understand the significance of what she was implying. Around them, the gas station remained quiet, the witnesses waiting for the next moment to unfold. And standing there beside the SUV, Naomi Brooks looked less like someone being questioned and more like someone patiently waiting for a much bigger picture to reveal itself. For a moment, Sheriff Cole Mercer did not speak. He simply looked up toward the small security camera mounted under the metal canopy, the same camera Naomi Brooks had pointed out only seconds earlier. The lens rotated slowly with a faint mechanical sound, capturing every movement beneath the pumps, every flicker of the patrol lights, every curious face watching from the edges of the lot. Mercer lowered his gaze again and studied Naomi more carefully than before. Something about her calm tone, the quiet certainty in the way she spoke, had begun to irritate him in a way he could not quite explain. In his years wearing a badge, he had dealt with people who argued, people who panicked, and people who tried to talk their way out of trouble. But this was different. Naomi Brooks did none of those things. She stood beside the SUV as if she had all the time in the world, her posture relaxed, her eyes observant, almost patient. The sheriff folded his arms and gave a small skeptical shake of his head. He said that the camera was not important right now and that the only thing that mattered was determining whether the vehicle in front of them had been reported stolen. His voice carried the confident authority that had rarely been challenged in Ridge County. A few of the bystanders nodded quietly, assuming the sheriff was simply doing his job. Naomi listened without interrupting. When he finished, she slowly removed her hand from the pocket of her jacket, but did not yet reveal what she had reached for earlier. Instead, she rested her hand lightly against the SUV door and looked out across the station for a brief moment. The highway beyond the pumps shimmered under the fading sunlight as another truck passed in the distance, its tires humming along the asphalt before the sound faded into the quiet countryside. Naomi seemed to measure the moment carefully before speaking again. She explained calmly that assumptions could be dangerous when people made them too quickly. Mercer let out a short breath that sounded almost like a quiet laugh. He replied that he had been a sheriff for more than 20 years, and that quick assumptions were sometimes necessary when protecting a community. His words carried a tone that suggested the matter was simple in his mind. Naomi nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the experience behind his statement, but her eyes remained thoughtful. She said that sometimes protecting a community required seeing more than what appeared obvious at first glance. The sheriff glanced again at the SUV, then at Naomi, then at the phone held by the teenager recording the entire exchange. He did not like the feeling that the moment had begun to shift away from his control. Mercer cleared his throat and repeated that he still needed confirmation of the vehicle ownership. He asked again for identification. Naomi finally reached into her jacket pocket once more, but instead of immediately handing anything over, she paused and spoke quietly. She asked the sheriff whether he had noticed the black sedan parked at the far edge of the lot when he arrived. Mercer frowned slightly and turned his head in the direction she indicated. At the edge of the station, near the gravel entrance, an older black sedan sat partially hidden beside an ice machine freezer. It had been there for several minutes, unnoticed by most of the people focused on the patrol cruiser and the SUV. Mercer squinted toward it, clearly trying to recall whether he had paid attention to the vehicle earlier. Naomi continued speaking in the same steady tone, explaining that sometimes the vehicle people focused on was not the one that mattered most. The sheriff turned back toward her, confusion now mixing with the certainty he had carried only moments earlier. Around them, the small crowd sensed the tension shifting in a way they did not fully understand. The pickup truck driver leaned forward slightly. The teenager recording adjusted his phone. Naomi Brooks remained perfectly calm beside the SUV as she finished her thought, quietly suggesting that the situation unfolding at the gas station might not be about a stolen vehicle at all, but about something happening right in front of them that the sheriff had not yet realized. The sheriff's eyes followed Naomi Brooks's gesture across the gas station lot, narrowing as he focused on the black sedan sitting quietly near the ice machine freezer at the far edge of the gravel entrance. The car had been there long enough that it blended into the background of the small station, the kind of vehicle people ignored unless they had a reason to notice it. Sheriff Cole Mercer folded his arms again and stared toward it for several seconds, trying to recall exactly what he had seen when he first drove in. At the time, his attention had been fixed on the SUV beside pump number 4 and the woman standing next to it. Now, however, the sedan seemed suddenly more important than it had moments earlier. The sheriff turned back toward Naomi with a faint crease forming between his eyebrows. He asked her why she was talking about that car when the conversation was supposed to be about the SUV. Naomi remained calm, her voice steady as she replied that sometimes the thing drawing the most attention was not the real problem at all. The bystanders shifted slightly, sensing that the situation had taken a turn they had not expected. The pickup truck driver looked toward the black sedan for the first time, squinting as if trying to see inside the tinted windows. The teenager recording lifted his phone a little higher, adjusting his angle so both vehicles appeared in the frame. Inside the store, the cashier pushed the glass door open just enough to hear more clearly. Sheriff Mercer took a slow breath and stepped a few feet closer to Naomi, lowering his voice slightly, though it still carried across the quiet lot. He explained that his responsibility was to investigate a report of a stolen vehicle and that the SUV matched the description he had received earlier that afternoon. Naomi nodded again, acknowledging the point without arguing it. She said that she understood why he had focused on the SUV first. Anyone arriving at the station and seeing a vehicle like that might assume the same thing. Her words sounded almost sympathetic, but there was a quiet confidence beneath them that made the sheriff uneasy. Mercer glanced once more toward the black sedan. The vehicle remained perfectly still, its dark windows reflecting the soft glow of the gas station canopy lights. Nothing about it appeared unusual at first glance. Yet Naomi continued watching it with a focus that suggested she had been paying attention to it long before the sheriff arrived. Mercer asked her directly why she believed that car mattered. Naomi did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked briefly at the rotating security camera above the pumps again, then back toward the highway entrance as another vehicle passed in the distance. When she finally spoke, her tone remained calm but purposeful. She explained that for the last 15 minutes the sedan had not moved even once, despite several cars pulling in and out of the station. She pointed out that the driver had never stepped out to buy fuel, never entered the store, and never appeared to leave the vehicle at all. The sheriff listened carefully now, the certainty he had carried earlier beginning to shift into cautious curiosity. He had not noticed those details when he arrived, but hearing them now made the quiet sedan seem far less ordinary. Naomi continued speaking, explaining that people who waited in places like this without doing anything usually had a reason for waiting. Mercer slowly turned his head again toward the car. The late afternoon sunlight had begun to fade slightly, casting longer shadows across the gravel entrance where the sedan remained parked. For the first time since stepping out of his cruiser, the sheriff looked uncertain. Naomi Brooks watched him calmly, the same patient composure in her posture as before. She had not raised her voice once, had not argued, had not tried to walk away. Instead, she had simply waited for the sheriff to notice what she had been observing from the beginning. And as Mercer stood there studying the quiet vehicle at the edge of the lot, he began to realize that the situation unfolding at the gas station might not be as straightforward as he had believed only a few minutes earlier. The gas station lot remained quiet except for the distant hum of traffic rolling along Highway 27 and the soft ticking sound of Sheriff Cole Mercer's patrol lights reflecting across the concrete. Mercer stood still beside pump number 4, his attention now divided between Naomi Brooks and the black sedan sitting silently near the gravel entrance. The certainty he had carried when he first stepped out of his cruiser was no longer as firm as it had been minutes earlier. Instead, there was a growing awareness that he might have focused on the wrong detail from the beginning. Naomi did not rush the moment. She remained beside the SUV with the same steady posture she had held since the sheriff arrived, her eyes moving briefly from the sedan to the canopy camera and then back toward Mercer. The bystanders sensed the shift even if they did not fully understand it. The pickup truck driver straightened slightly, curiosity replacing the casual interest he had shown earlier. The teenager recording adjusted his stance again, angling his phone toward the far edge of the lot, so the quiet sedan appeared more clearly in the frame. Inside the store, the cashier leaned further out of the doorway, her arms folded as she tried to follow every word spoken beneath the canopy. Sheriff Mercer cleared his throat and took a few slow steps toward the edge of the pump area, his boots crunching softly on the gravel as he moved closer to the direction Naomi had indicated. From this angle, the black sedan looked even more still, its windows dark and reflective under the fading sunlight. Mercer stopped several yards away and studied the vehicle carefully. He could not see clearly through the glass, but he noticed the engine did not appear to be running and the driver door had not opened since he arrived. After several seconds, he turned back toward Naomi. His voice sounded slightly different now, less certain, though he tried to maintain the authority he had carried before. He asked her directly why she had been watching that car in the first place. Naomi stepped away from the SUV, just enough to face him more clearly. Her voice remained calm, but there was now a quiet seriousness behind it that the sheriff could not ignore. She explained that she had arrived at the gas station a few minutes before the patrol cruiser appeared, and that the sedan had already been parked there when she pulled in. At first, she had assumed the driver was simply resting or making a phone call. But after several minutes passed, and the vehicle still had not moved, she began to pay closer attention. She described how the sedan had arrived from the highway entrance, paused briefly as if the driver was checking the lot, and then parked in the corner rather than at a pump. She explained that no one had stepped out of the car and no one had entered the store. Mercer listened carefully now, his earlier assumptions fading as the details began to form a picture he had not considered. Naomi continued speaking, explaining that people who waited in places like this without doing anything often had a reason for waiting. Sometimes they were watching someone else. The sheriff slowly turned his head again toward the sedan, the weight of her words settling in his mind. The small crowd remained silent, every pair of eyes shifting toward the quiet vehicle at the edge of the lot. Naomi Brooks stood calmly beside the SUV and spoke one final sentence in the same measured tone that had guided the conversation from the beginning. She explained that the sheriff had arrived believing he was investigating a stolen vehicle, but from where she had been standing the entire time, it had looked much more like someone else in that parking lot was the one doing the observing. For several long seconds, Sheriff Cole Mercer said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the black sedan parked near the gravel entrance, as if he were trying to see through the dark glass from 30 feet away. The late afternoon light had shifted again, stretching long shadows across the gas station lot while the hum of the highway rolled quietly in the background. The situation no longer felt like a simple traffic stop. It felt like a puzzle that had suddenly been turned in a new direction. Mercer slowly walked a few steps closer toward the edge of the pump area, his boots crunching softly against loose gravel. He did not approach the sedan directly yet. Instead, he paused, glancing back toward Naomi Brooks as if measuring the confidence in her words. Naomi had not moved from her place beside the SUV. Her posture remained composed, her arms relaxed, her attention divided between the sheriff and the vehicle she had been watching from the beginning. The crowd around the pumps had grown slightly larger. A couple who had arrived moments earlier for fuel now stood beside their car with the pump handle forgotten in place, quietly observing the tension building in the lot. The teenager recording held his phone steady, careful not to miss a second of the unfolding moment. Mercer looked again toward the sedan and then back at Naomi. His voice carried less authority now and more curiosity than before. He asked her one direct question. He asked how she could be so certain that the car had been watching someone. Naomi did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward from the SUV and walked a few feet closer to the sheriff, stopping just inside the glow of the canopy lights. When she spoke, her voice remained calm, but the explanation she gave was precise and deliberate. She said that when she first arrived at the gas station, she had noticed the sedan pull in from the highway at a slow speed, the kind of speed people used when they were scanning a location rather than simply looking for fuel. The car had circled once past the pumps before parking near the entrance where it could see both the road and the station. Naomi explained that since that moment the vehicle had remained perfectly still. No one had stepped out. No door had opened. The engine had not even started again. She told the sheriff that behavior like that usually meant someone inside the car was waiting for a specific person or a specific vehicle to appear. Mercer listened carefully, his eyes drifting once more toward the sedan. The quiet car now looked far less ordinary than it had before. Naomi continued speaking, explaining that the moment the sheriff pulled into the station, the sedan had shifted slightly in its parking position, just a few inches forward, almost as if the driver had leaned closer to watch the interaction between them. That detail caused Mercer to straighten slightly. He had not noticed the movement himself, but hearing it now made him reconsider the entire scene unfolding around him. Naomi finally reached into her jacket pocket again and removed a slim leather case. She held it calmly at her side without opening it yet. The sheriff's attention moved immediately to the object in her hand. The bystanders leaned forward in quiet anticipation. Naomi looked at Mercer with the same steady composure she had carried since the moment he stepped out of his cruiser. Then she spoke again, her voice low but unmistakably clear. She explained that the reason she had been watching the sedan so closely was because she had not come to the gas station by accident. She had come there because she believed someone inside that car had been following her for nearly 15 miles along Highway 27. And now, standing beneath the quiet glow of the canopy lights, Naomi Brooks calmly told Sheriff Cole Mercer that the situation he believed he was investigating had never actually been about a stolen vehicle at all. The quiet statement Naomi Brooks had just made seemed to settle over the gas station like a sudden shift in the air. Sheriff Cole Mercer looked at her for a long moment without speaking, his attention moving slowly from the leather case in her hand to the black sedan still parked near the gravel entrance. The late afternoon sun had dipped lower now, casting a deeper orange glow across the canopy roof and stretching the shadows of the vehicles across the concrete. The small crowd remained silent, sensing that whatever was unfolding had grown far more serious than a routine question about a vehicle. Mercer cleared his throat and spoke carefully, asking Naomi what exactly she meant when she said the situation was never about a stolen SUV. Naomi did not raise her voice. She simply opened the slim leather case in her hand and held it where the sheriff could see. Inside was a badge and identification card issued by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The metal badge caught the canopy light and reflected a brief flash across the sheriff's face. Naomi Brooks calmly explained that she was a federal agent assigned to a task force that had been tracking a network involved in organized vehicle theft across several counties. For the past week, investigators had been monitoring multiple suspects believed to be moving stolen vehicles along Highway 27 toward a larger distribution point outside the state. Earlier that afternoon, Naomi had been following one of those leads when she noticed the black sedan appear in her rearview mirror several miles north of the gas station. At first, she assumed the driver was simply traveling in the same direction. But after 15 miles, the car had remained behind her through several turns and changes in speed. When she pulled into the station to observe the vehicle more closely, the sedan had entered shortly after and parked near the entrance without approaching the pumps or the store. Sheriff Mercer listened without interrupting now, the earlier confidence in his posture replaced by a more cautious attention. Naomi continued explaining that she had stayed beside the SUV deliberately, waiting to see whether the sedan would make a move or reveal who was inside. Instead, the vehicle remained parked, watching. She told the sheriff that when his cruiser entered the lot, it had unexpectedly changed the dynamic of the situation. The driver inside the sedan had shifted slightly forward in the seat, but still had not stepped out. Mercer turned slowly toward the car again. The sedan looked just as still as before, its dark windows reflecting the glow of the gas station lights and the quiet movement of traffic along the highway. Naomi closed the leather case and lowered it calmly to her side. She said that the SUV the sheriff believed might be stolen was actually a federal vehicle assigned to the investigation. The license plate had been registered through a special operations unit specifically so agents could move through different counties without drawing attention. The bystanders exchanged surprised looks as the meaning of her words began to sink in. The pickup truck driver let out a quiet whistle under his breath. The teenager holding the phone lowered it slightly, realizing he had just recorded something far more unusual than he expected when he stepped out of the store. Mercer slowly exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck, his gaze moving between Naomi and the sedan. Again, the situation he had assumed he understood only minutes earlier had clearly been something very different from the beginning. Naomi looked toward the edge of the lot once more and spoke calmly, explaining that whoever was sitting in that sedan had been observing her movements for several miles and had now watched the entire exchange at the gas station unfold. And as Sheriff Mercer followed her gaze once more toward the quiet vehicle near the entrance, he finally began to understand that the real story of what was happening at that gas station had only just begun. For a moment, the gas station lot felt completely still, as if every person present had quietly realized that the story unfolding in front of them had just taken a turn no one expected. Sheriff Cole Mercer stood beside pump number 4 with his eyes fixed on the black sedan near the gravel entrance, the same vehicle Naomi Brooks had been observing long before his patrol cruiser rolled into the station. The red and blue lights from the cruiser continued to flash softly across the pavement, reflecting off the SUV and the windows of the convenience store, but the atmosphere no longer carried the tension of an accusation. It carried the weight of understanding. Mercer slowly nodded, absorbing everything Naomi had explained. For years, he had been the one people relied on to read situations quickly and act with certainty. But standing there now, he understood that sometimes the clearest story was not the first one that appeared. He turned slightly toward Naomi and spoke with a calmer tone than before, acknowledging that he had arrived believing he was responding to a routine report of a stolen vehicle. Naomi listened without judgment. She simply gave a small, respectful nod, the same calm composure that had guided every moment of the conversation since the beginning. Then she turned her attention back toward the sedan once more. The vehicle remained parked exactly where it had been for nearly 20 minutes, its dark windows reflecting the fading daylight. Naomi explained that whoever was inside that car had likely been expecting her to continue driving down the highway rather than stop somewhere public. The unexpected presence of a sheriff's cruiser and several witnesses had changed the environment entirely. Sheriff Mercer followed her gaze toward the vehicle and quietly reached for the radio on his shoulder. His voice remained steady as he requested another unit to approach the gas station from the highway side, not with urgency, but with the calm precision of someone who now understood the importance of the moment. Naomi remained beside the SUV, watching the sedan carefully while the small group of bystanders observed in complete silence. The pickup truck driver leaned back against his vehicle again, no longer whispering, but simply waiting. The teenager with the phone lowered it slowly, sensing that the moment had become less about recording a scene and more about witnessing something real. A few seconds later, far down the road, the faint shape of another patrol vehicle appeared in the distance as it turned off Highway 27 toward the station entrance. The sedan near the gravel edge remained still, its presence no longer unnoticed. Sheriff Mercer glanced toward Naomi once more and gave a small nod of appreciation, recognizing that the calm woman he had questioned only minutes earlier had in fact been carefully observing every detail long before he arrived. Naomi Brooks stood quietly beneath the canopy lights, her eyes steady, her posture relaxed, as though she had always known that patience and clarity would eventually reveal the truth. The quiet gas station on Highway 27 slowly returned to its usual rhythm as the evening light faded across the countryside. And in that moment, Sheriff Cole Mercer understood something that every officer eventually learns if they pay attention long enough. Authority might wear a badge,